Welcome to the Thank Goddess podcast. It's Danny here, your host. Welcome back to my regular listeners and those of you who are new here to join this conversation. Welcome. I hope you enjoy this episode because it's going to be a deep dive. Today I am coming to you solo and we're going to be talking about one of my beloveds, Mary Magdalene, who I've spoken about on this podcast before. Today we're going to be dissecting the Gospel of Mary. So even if you haven't read the Gospel or you don't know much about the Gospel, that's okay, because today we're going to be going through a lot of the different themes and passages and quotes from the Gospel, and to be dissecting it and talking about why this gospel is so important and so revolutionary and why it was kept out of the Bible and the general teachings of the church. And I'm sure if you listen to this episode and you understand how different, I suppose, Mary's gospel is compared to the gospels within the Bible, not to mention that it's either written by a woman or it's written from the perspective of a woman compared to all the other gospels that are written by men. That's revolutionary in itself, but actually the substance, the matter of what's being discussed in this gospel is just so different to the narrative that was propagated and is propagated by the church. So today I'm going to do my best to talk about why Mary's gospel is just so important. I've got my notes next to me, so I'm going to be referring to that a lot, and I've got the gospel next to me as well. And I'm going to be reading from the gospel, not everything. I mean, we could spend all day here dissecting line by line, but I'm not going to do that because, I really want to just keep this short and concise as best as I can and just take bits and pieces that I think are the most important and deliver them to you, because maybe this is not going to be everyone's cup of tea to go through line by line. But, if you're like me and you enjoy theology, then yeah, you might really enjoy this conversation. You might want to go and get yourself a copy of the Gospel of Mary and dissect it for yourself. And I want to also mention that I am not a theologian and, I don't have a doctor in theology or anything like that. I am just a truth seeker. I love learning and I read many, many spiritual texts. And I'm not saying by any means that I have all the answers and that I know everything and that everything I discuss here you have to resonate with and believe and take with you on your day. What I say in so much of my content and at my events is just take what resonates, leave what doesn't. And what I'm sharing with you is just my interpretation through my understanding of God. I would consider myself to be a Gnostic. I mean, I don't even really like to put myself in any kind of category. I definitely, when I speak about the Gospel of Mary, I'm not coming from a traditional Christian lens. I don't identify with religion. I was raised Catholic, to give you a bit of a background, but I don't identify as Catholic nor Christian. I identify more with Christ consciousness, with gnosis, and maybe Christian mysticism. I love going into Christian teachings. I work a lot with Jesus and with Mary Magdalene and going deeper into their teachings, not just what was taught or propagated by the church and by Christianity. Because from my understanding, what the church says about Jesus and his teachings and what Jesus was actually teaching are two very different things. And Mary's gospel for me is more aligned, and not just Mary's gospel, but the other Gnostic gospels, which I've also read, are more aligned with what Jesus was actually teaching, opposed to what Christianity has. I'm not saying all of Christianity is wrong. That's a very bold statement. I'm not anti-religion by any means. I just think that there are a lot of misinterpretations of the Bible and maybe even things that are written in the Bible itself. I think what was gathered to be put in the Bible, what was decided to be included in the Bible, and what was not decided to be put in the Bible was manipulated for certain agendas. And I won't get into all of that. That's just my belief from my own research. And I mean, that's another rabbit hole we could go down. Why did they leave out these gospels, these Gnostic gospels, which were discovered in 1945? I'm gonna leave it there, and I'm going to let you, after, if you stick with me in this episode and we go through Mary's gospel, you can decide for yourself why you think that this was left out of the Bible, and why, you know, these texts weren't discovered until 1945, why they were buried. That suggests that they were hidden, right? So I don't know if I actually mentioned, Mary's gospel was one of the gospels that were discovered, like I said, in 1945 in the library of Nag Hammadi, which was basically, it was these buried Gnostic or Christian scripture that I suppose, because it was buried, it was kind of accidentally stumbled upon and was discovered. And I mean, we could say there's a reason why they were hidden. There's a reason why they're hidden. And I'm going to leave it up to you why you think. Maybe you even want to reach out to me after this episode and give me your thoughts on it. Why do you think this book, this gospel is revolutionary? Do you believe that there was a huge agenda that was being propagated by the church, that Mary's gospel basically threatened that agenda, that it went against everything that they were trying to promote at that time? I mean, big claims I'm making, but I won't get into that. Today we're just going to dissect the gospel. So let's get into it. So Mary's gospel, for those of you that haven't read it, it's a short one. It's short and sweet. It's missing a lot of pages, which is very suspicious. And you'll find that the pages that are missing, they could reveal a lot to us, right? But I suppose we make do with what we have. And thankfully we do have a few of the pages still remaining, and we can dissect them as best as we can with what we have. And there's still so much juice in what we do have, despite the missing pages. So the first 6 pages of the gospel, I'll add, are missing. So we start on page 7, right? And so the first thing I want to pull out, and this is basically how the Gospel of Mary starts, Mary's having a conversation with Jesus, with Yeshua. And Mary asks Jesus, what is matter? So it starts off, like, let's just take a minute here. This gospel is starting off metaphysical. Mary is asking Jesus, what is matter? Matter as in, what is, I'm holding this water bottle at the moment, matter. Our bodies, matter. Everything that's in this universe, this 3D dimension, is matter. And Mary's asking Jesus, what is matter? We don't see much of that in the Bible, do we? And so she asks Jesus, what is matter? Will it last forever? And I won't read all of what Jesus says, but basically, you know, the main thing to take away from Jesus's answer here is Jesus says everything returns to its roots. Matter returns to the origins of matter. So what is Jesus saying here? Matter returns to the origins of matter. If everything is matter and everything returns to its roots, basically what Jesus is talking about here is energy, that we are energy, that all matter is energy. And we have quantum physics that have scientifically proven this now. This is not just woo-woo spiritual stuff that we're talking. This is science. And Jesus, you know, is talking about metaphysics here. He's talking that all matter derives from the one source, and everything, and he even says, all that is composed shall be decomposed. So everything that is created in a physical sense will be decomposed and return to its roots. Matter returns to the origins of matter, which is source, which is God, which is universe, which is creator. Okay? So this is really huge, and this is how the gospel is starting for us. So this is like law of attraction teachings 101, right? Because we know that in quantum physics that 99.9999999% of matter is empty space. So essentially nothing is actually solid. And if this is like over your head, then I'm not going to talk about the law of attraction today. I'm not going to dive into quantum physics, but essentially this is what Jesus and Mary are having a conversation about. Okay, so this in itself is quite revolutionary, right? Because this is not so much what we're taught in the church from what I remember. So that's the first thing I want to pull out. The second thing, I'm going to just jump around throughout the gospel because, I don't want to, like I said, I'm not going to read the whole gospel. You can read that for yourself. But I'm pulling out things that I think are pretty significant and pretty revolutionary. Okay, so the second thing I want to talk about is this idea of sin. So those people that have been brought up, I know for myself being brought up in the Catholic Church, a big thing in Christianity is this whole idea of sinning, and we're all sinners on earth and we have to repent for our sins. Okay, it's a big idea within the church, right? Even this whole idea of the 7 deadly sins. Now, Mary's gospel is very interesting in that sense, and I feel like this is a real threat to that whole sinning, making people feel guilty, making people feel ashamed of themselves, particularly their sexuality, particularly being a woman. There's so much stigma around sin, right? And Mary asked Jesus in her gospel, what is the sin of the world? And in the Gospel of Mary, Jesus is referred to as the teacher. She calls him the teacher. So the teacher answered, Jesus answered, there is no sin. Let me repeat that. There is no sin. It is you who make sin exist when you act according to the habits of your corrupted nature. This is where sin lies. Now, I really want to clarify here what Jesus is talking about, because first off, he states there is no sin. So there actually is no such thing as sin, but he says that we make sin exist when we act according to the habits of our corrupted nature. Now, what is he talking about here? Now, I'm going to reference A Course in Miracles, which I'm a devoted student of, and basically A Course of Miracles is a channel text of Jesus. So Jesus clarifies a lot of these Christian terms and explains what he was truly teaching, not what the church has said it means. So Jesus speaks about sin in A Course in Miracles, and the way that he describes it is a sin means to make a mistake. So a sin, and let me explain this further, a sin is to forget who you are, essentially. So what Mary's gospel says, and we're going to get into this, in just a bit as we get deeper into her text, but it's saying that we are God. We are eternal spirits. We are, and I'm kind of jumping ahead because I know on the next page we're going to talk about this, but essentially, if we are, and this goes back to that question about what is matter, if we are made from the one source, right? Because all matter returns to the origins of matter, everything returns to its roots. So Jesus is saying that all matter stems from the one source. So the one source, God, universe, creator, we stem from that, right? So in terms of God, in terms of creator, in terms of source, which we are an extension of, there is no such thing as sin, okay? But when we believe, I'm going to say this slowly so everyone can really digest this. When we believe that we are separate from that source, when we forget that we are God, that we are one with God, that we are one with the universe, with the creator, that we are made from the likeness and image of God, when we forget that, and then we think, we attach ourselves to this physical body, matter, we think this 3D simulation is the real thing, and that there is no God, that there is nothing else except for me. You know, there's nothing else outside of planet Earth. Like, we are the only physical beings that exist, that just what I see, what I feel, what I taste, touch, like the 5 senses are my reality, and there is nothing outside of that. Okay? And if I truly believe that and I act from that perception, that is when we sin. And sin does not mean bad. Sin does not mean there's something wrong with human beings. Sin just means to act out of your nature, because your nature is to be one with God. Does that make sense? So let me say that again. Our true nature is being one with God and being one with Source. And when we forget that that is who we actually are, right? That's not to say that we spiritually bypass, but we go about our day in this human reality, but we remember that we are one with God. We are that pure awareness. We are that consciousness, right? That's who we truly are. Anyone who's meditated before and you've observed your thoughts and you realize, hang on a minute, I'm observing my thoughts. So that means I'm not my thoughts. So who is this part of me? What is this part of me that is aware of my thoughts, right? You know that part of you. Anyone who's meditated, anyone who does spiritual work, you understand what I'm talking about here. That observer, that godly part of you, that's the true you, the eternal spirit that knows no life or death, that reincarnates lifetime after lifetime after lifetime. The God within you, right? That is your true nature. And to forget that, to completely dismiss that, and we have a lot of agendas on this earth that are trying to separate us from God because they don't want us to know our true power, and I've spoken about victim consciousness in previous episodes. If we don't know our power, if we don't know that we are God, then guess what? We give all our power to other people, to other things, to everything outside of ourselves. And so that's why there are certain agendas on the planet that take advantage of these beliefs and try to manipulate them so people are disempowered, because guess what? They get more power, or they think they get more power by disempowering other people, right? And I'm not going to go down that tangent, but I hope I've clarified that to all of you. So what I essentially want to say here is that sin does not mean that we're bad, that there's something wrong with human nature. Basically, it just means to identify with the ego, with separation. So we all have an ego, but it's like separation consciousness. Like, I am just this physical body and nothing more. And, you know, when we forget, and of course we're always going to make mistakes. We're always going to have those moments when we are separate from God, because we're living this experience where we are in a human body, in this 3D reality. When we incarnate on planet Earth, we are meant to forget that we are these eternal spirits, and then we go on this crazy journey through life, and hopefully that leads us back to Source, back to God, right? It reconnects us with our truth. But the main message here is that there's nothing inherently wrong with you, okay? And yeah, we make mistakes, we fall, we sometimes hurt people, we hurt ourselves, sometimes we beat ourselves up and we go, oh, I'm so stupid, I did that thing. Or we buy into this belief that we are separate from God, ourselves, and everyone else is separate to us. Even the environment, you know, like someone who throws litter on the ground doesn't recognize that the earth is you. Like, every living being on this earth has a soul, is derived from the one source. And so when you chuck litter on the floor, say outside at the park, you're throwing litter on yourself. Like, that's a part of you. That's a different incarnation of you, but it is you. And if people truly knew that they were one with God, they wouldn't litter. They wouldn't harm other people. They wouldn't commit crimes, right? And this is what Jesus is saying. A sin is to forget your true nature. And that's what's happened. People have forgotten who they are and are believing in this dream, this illusion. I think that's enough for that. I think you guys are with me. Now, I want to also mention that in Mary's gospel, which I absolutely love, she refers to God as the good. So Jesus says here, and she refers to it herself, this is why the good God has come into your midst. It acts together with the elements of your nature as to reunite you with its roots. So essentially, this is why God has come into your life, right? This is why God has come into your life, because it acts together with the elements of your nature, who you truly are, and reunites it with its roots. So that's exactly what I was saying. It reunites you with the truth of who you are. And I love that she uses the word good, because for some of us, God can be quite triggering, particularly if you have religious trauma, right? Particularly if you've been told that God is like a sky daddy and it's a man in the sky, a very judgmental, patriarchal figure. And I personally use the word God, but that I don't think of God as like a sky daddy. But if you do, I really love the fact that Mary doesn't refer to God as God, because some people, again, like associate God with a gender. God is genderless. God is not man or woman. But I like the idea of using the word good, the good, because that's what God is. God for me is just universal love. It's not man or woman. It's not a person. It's like, I mean, I don't think we can even describe God, like what is God, but it feels more like just this pure, unconditional love creator energy. Like, that's it. Like, not a human, a big human man in the sky. So I just wanted to mention that. So, okay, moving on. I think I spent enough time on that. Okay, the next page, page 8. So the next thing I wanted to talk about, and I think this is really important, is that Jesus says in Mary's gospel, be vigilant and allow no one to mislead you by saying, here it is, or there it is, for it is within you, that the Son of Man, the Christ, dwells within you. Go to him, for those who seek him find him. Now I just want to break that apart. So what Jesus is saying here is that be vigilant, right? Allow no one to mislead you, the church, by saying, here it is, or there it is, right? What he's saying is, when he's talking about this, he's talking about God, right? Finding God. It's not outside of you. So if anyone is telling you that God is out here, it's here, be vigilant, for it is within you. God is within you. For those who seek him, find him. For those who seek him, find him. Religious dogma constantly tells us that, again, that God is like this sky daddy and that we have to repent for our sins. And what Jesus is saying in the Gospel of Mary is that that's all a lie. And be very wary of these people who say that. Because the Christ, and even Jesus is here is saying that he is not Christ. He's saying that the Christ dwells within all of us. That we have our own internal Christ. That's what Jesus is saying here. That's not what we've been taught in Christianity. We've been told Jesus is the Christ. Jesus is the Son of God. We're not the sons of God. We're not the children of God. We're not equal to Jesus. Well, if you understand Mary's gospel and where this is going, you betcha that we are equal to Jesus, that we are all children of God. We are all the sons of God, and we all have our own Christ within us. So this is like huge. Can you see why the church didn't want us to include this in the Bible? This is very, very empowering stuff, people. You can tell I'm excited. Okay, moving on. I want to keep going because I'm like, I know I'm like dawdling here. Okay, the next page, page 9. Okay, this I absolutely love. Like, this is for the women, right? Okay, women empowerment. Okay, so basically it says that Jesus died. So now we're moving to a different part of the text. So Jesus has died. So the conversation Mary and Jesus had is finished. We have Jesus has been crucified, and now the disciples are in fear. Okay, so their leader, Jesus, has been killed, and now the disciples are fearing their own lives. I'll read a bit to you. The disciples were in sorrow, shedding many tears and saying, "How are we to go among the unbelievers and announce the gospel of the kingdom of the Son of Man? They did not spare his life, so why would they spare ours?" And guess what? This is the part that I love. Then Mary arose, and she embraced them all and began to speak to her brothers. "Do not remain in sorrow and doubt, for his grace will guide you and comfort you. Instead, let us praise his greatness, for he has prepared us for this. He is calling upon us to become fully human." And Mary turned their hearts towards the good God, and they began to discuss the teachings, the meaning of the teacher's words. So I love this because this shows that, particularly for that time, this is why this text is so revolutionary, because this was a time when women were second-class citizens. And what we're seeing here is Mary stepping up as a leader. She's not referred to as a leader of the disciples in the Bible, in Christianity, but in her gospel, she was the one that held the faith after Jesus' crucifixion. All the other disciples were afraid. They were in fear, and Mary was the one to stand up and to lead them back to God, back to the teachings. She was the one that calmed them, and she did it in such a beautiful feminine way. She did it in like this gentle way. She comforted the other disciples. She called them her brothers. And I think that's so beautiful because Mary, she was such a beautiful embodiment of the divine feminine. She not only was a woman, but the way that she went about leading, because I do believe, and if you don't know much about Mary Magdalene, go back and listen to episode 18 of this podcast where I talk about Mary Magdalene, why she's so important in the reclamation of the divine feminine, is because she embodied these beautiful divine feminine qualities, this way of being, this gentleness, this compassionate nature, and she brought those forwards in her way of leadership. And I think that is something that is so missing from a lot of religious dogma. We see a lot of men at the heads of churches, at the heads of, other religious organizations. And Mary's gospel shows that Jesus saw her as a spiritual leader and equal to her. And even the other disciples, as you're going to see, saw her as a leader, as a teacher in her own right. They looked up to her when Jesus passed away. So I think that says a lot about women, and the fact that this gospel was hidden and Mary's name was tarnished as she was called a prostitute, and she was saved by 7 demons, with what they said in the Bibles. Mary Magdalene was such a threat to women being seen as spiritual leaders. That's what it was about. This went against the whole agenda of the patriarchy. And once upon a time, believe it or not, women were really seen as spiritual leaders because women typically are able to connect with other realms. They have strong intuition. That's the feminine energy. And all of that got demised by the patriarchy, by religion, and we had more of this like dogmatic, masculine, structure come in, this sky daddy. And what Mary's gospel is alluding to is that no, women have every right to be female leaders. And what I want to point out here, there was one sentence which said, he is calling upon us to become fully human. So what does that mean, fully human? So if you read the gospel, it talks about, that was it. So when this gospel was found, it wasn't found in English, it was found in Coptic, so they had to translate it. And the word that they translated to fully human was originally anthropos. And so anthropos, when they talk about fully human, what they're talking about is to be fully human and fully divine at the same time. To be human and divine, which means to be fully human. So essentially what they're talking about is, as we mentioned before, this whole idea of matter and spirit being one. So we're in this human body, we're appearing as matter, but remember how I said we have this eternal nature, that we are derived from the one source. That's our spiritual essence, so to say. That's who we truly are. And to be fully human is to be embodied in the human body, to be this, I'm Danielle in this lifetime, in this time-space reality that we're living in right now. That's my name, Danielle, right? And I have this eternal spirit, which is not Danielle, which will carry on lifetime after lifetime. That spirit within me, if I am to walk in this world, in this 3D matrix, and remember my divinity as I walk and be present to every present moment and remember my divinity in each moment, that is how I am fully human. And that's what Mary's gospel is inviting for all of us to step into. Okay, let's move on. So, the next page, page 10. This is huge. So I personally believe that Jesus and Mary were married and had children. And I'm not going to say that there's hard evidence for this. Maybe one day we'll have exposure about it. But that's my truth. Regardless if you believe that they were a couple and they were intimate together, it says here that Mary had a special relationship with Jesus. Again, it doesn't have to be romantic, but there was some sort of special connection between the two. Because here in Mary's gospel, Peter said to Mary, and Peter the disciple, "Sister, we know that the teacher loved you differently from other women." Let me repeat that. "Sister, we know that the teacher loved you differently from other women. Tell us whatever you remember of any words he told you which we have not yet heard." So this is huge what Peter is saying. First of all, he's saying that Mary, the teacher, Jesus, loved Mary more than other women. I mean, come on. Does that not allude to the fact that there was something more to their relationship than just teacher-student? Maybe she was just a very devoted student, right? Or could it be that they were a couple? That's for us to decipher. And number two, the most important thing here is that Peter is saying, tell us whatever you remember of any words he told you which we have not yet heard. So Peter is admitting, right? And people say Peter was Jesus's, top disciple. But Peter is saying here that Jesus shared teachings with Mary that the others didn't receive. So what does that say? That Mary was able to receive teachings that the other disciples could not receive. Why? Because she was doing the work. She was very advanced compared to the other disciples. And this is why the church works so hard to demise her name, because she's a direct threat against all of it. You can't undermine her power. You can't tarnish her reputation by calling her a prostitute. It's so evident here that there's more to her than what we've been told. So Mary's going to tell them what she knows of Jesus that they don't know. And here we go. So Mary says, I had a vision of the teacher. So now we're going to get into Mary's vision of Jesus. So this is after he's passed. And this is really key. When she says, I had a vision of the teacher, again, it's alluding to the feminine energy, because what did I say? Feminine energy is very much intangible. It's about intuition. It's about the psychic senses and seeing beyond the tangible, seeing different layers of reality, right? And so when Mary's saying, I had a vision, it means that she had spiritual abilities at this point. So those of us on a spiritual path know that, I will say that some people, probably based on past lifetimes, can come into an incarnation and have certain psych abilities turned on. So they could have their third eye activated from birth. But a lot of us, what we have to do is we have to, I suppose, cleanse or do the shadow work through the lower chakras to release any blockages in the way of our higher chakras coming online, so that our spiritual abilities, psychic abilities activate, right? So they're always there. It's just that a lot of us have experienced trauma and, all the conditioning we receive from the outside world and our families and our upbringings and whatnot. And we have to release all of that. And Jesus speaks a lot in different gospels about returning to the child, to babies, to infancy, and essentially it's about undoing all the conditioning and coming back to that innocent, pure mindset. And through that innocence, that's when miracles start to occur. That's when, they're always there. It's just that we can't see it, because it's like, throughout all our traumas and life experiences and conditionings and things like that, particularly in this time space that we're living in right now. We're living at kind of dark times on the planet. It's getting better, but it's a challenging time to be a human right now. And basically it's like we're wearing glasses, because of all the crap that we've absorbed over the years. And when you do the spiritual work, it's like kind of cleaning those glasses so you can finally see the true reality. So I hope that makes sense. So, Mary's vision. Lord, I see you now in this vision. And Jesus answered, you are blessed, for the sight of me does not disturb you. And this is a really important line. There where is the nous, or the nu, where there is the nu, lies the treasure. Okay, I'll come back to that in a second. Then Mary said to him, Lord, when someone meets you in a moment of vision, is it through the soul that they see, or is it through the spirit? The teacher answered, it is neither through the soul nor the spirit, but the nu between the two, which sees the vision, and it is which, and then it cuts off, and then we have missing pages after that, which is very interesting, right? An interesting time for there to be missing pages. Now I want to dissect this, because this is very big, right? This is probably the most important thing, in my opinion, in the gospel. What is Jesus talking about when he says, where there is the nu lies the treasure? And Mary asks, when I have this vision, when I see you in this vision, am I seeing you through the soul or the spirit? So essentially the spirit is the Father, and the soul, what she's referring to, is the psyche. So it's like, is it the human or is it God, which I'm seeing you? And Jesus is saying the nu between the two. So what is that? The bridge between spirit and matter. And you know how I was talking about that awareness, that conscious awareness. So when we meditate and we're aware of our thoughts, right? That observer, that is what I believe to be the nu. It's that bridge between spirit and matter. And that's what Jesus is saying. Through that is the treasure. And the treasure is true vision. And Jesus says a lot in A Course in Miracles, and it's even spoken about here. I had a vision of the teacher. So Jesus says in A Course in Miracles so much throughout the text that true vision doesn't come with the body's eyes. So vision is not actually like a physical sense, which most of us think of, right? Vision, true vision, it's when you are one with the Creator and you were able to see through the Creator's eyes, which is more so, I want to say it's more like an experience within the heart where you recognize that all is one, that we all derive from the one source. It's like oneness, unity, consciousness, seeing that everything is interconnected, right? That's true vision, because that's how God sees reality. God sees everything as just part of itself, right? God doesn't know separation. God just knows all that is. It's all my creation. Everything just is. But we, from the human lens, from our conditioning, we believe that everything is separate. I'm separate from this. I'm separate from that tree. I'm separate from you. I'm separate from all of the audience here. God doesn't see it like that. It's all one. And so when we have true vision, when we connect to the bridge between source and matter, that is when we can see through the lens of God. And that is where the treasure lies, is what Jesus says. So I hope I've broken that down well enough for you to follow. This is like such a huge, deep text. Like we could spend all day, but I know I'm trying to move through this as quickly as possible so we can get through it. Okay. So now after that, so like I said, there's pages missing after that. I wonder why, because it's such a big conversation. It's so empowering and liberating. So now Mary's in her vision and she's talking about the 7 deadly sins. But in Mary's gospel, she doesn't call them sins, because remember, there is no sins. So Mary talks about them as the powers or the 7 veils of the ego. Okay, and basically in the next couple pages, she's talking about this conversation that she is having with her ego. Basically, like her soul and her ego are having this conversation, and it's talking about how she overcame the 7 veils. And at the end of her vision, she says, "That which opposed me has been slain, that which encircled me has vanished, my craving has faded." So it's funny, because if you hear about Mary from a lot of Christians and within the Bible itself, it always talks about Mary being saved from 7 demons. And I believe this is what it's talking about, okay? The 7 deadly sins, which she refers to here. But it's not so much in the sense that she was like this sinner and Jesus came and saved her from all these sins. She followed Jesus and his teachings, and through that, she was able to move through the different layers of her own psyche, of the ego, which is like the belief in separation. She was able to move through these different layers, and through that, she was able to access true vision, that nous, that connection to God, and to see God's vision, to see true vision, which is, remember, it's oneness. To be one with the Creator. And she did that by doing her shadow work. So that's what it's talking about here when she goes through the 7 veils, the 7 powers of the ego. And she talks about it in such a positive way, because she says through going through those different veils, she was able to receive like a blessing on the other side. So it wasn't like these, these sins, these 7 deadly sins are so bad, because on the other side of them, and I know Megan Watterson, the woman who wrote Mary Magdalene Revealed, talks about this a lot. I know, for example, like one of the deadly sins is anger, right? Or wrath. And I think it's Megan who spoke about how in Mary's gospel, she says on the opposite side of wrath is clarity. It's knowing what you want and knowing what you stand for. So there's always something positive that comes from the negative, because they are one in the same. So I love that positive spin that is included in Mary's gospel. And, we could do a whole another episode on the 7 veils of the ego. That would be really interesting, but I'm not going to get into it today because we've got so much to cover and we've already been going for some time now. I mean, how cool is that? Like that, it wasn't that Jesus saved her, she was this sinner. It was, no, she did the work. And I think that's what's so beautiful about Mary Magdalene, is because, we know that Joshua, that Jesus was this amazing spiritual teacher. I believe he was like the greatest teacher to walk on our planet. I don't even believe he was human. I believe he was a star seed, and he came from another star system to come and liberate humanity with his amazing teachings and his display of that oneness, that unity consciousness, the Christ consciousness. But Mary, on the other hand, she's so much more relatable, because the fact that she went through the 7 veils of the ego shows that she has an ego like we do, right? And those of us on a spiritual journey that are working on our shadows, Mary did the same thing. And she's been there where we are. She's like walked our path. She knows how it's hard to overcome those obstacles and to work in the darkness. And on the flip side of that, there is light. And I think that's so inspiring and such a beautiful message to all of us, that there's light at the end of the tunnel. And a lot of people think spirituality is like, oh, love and light. But those of us that are, on an awakening path, we know that it's actually not that at all. I mean, yeah, you access more light, but you have to also go through the darkness. You have to go through a lot of dark nights and ego deaths in order to reach higher states of bliss. So I think Mary, she gets it. She gets the journey. She's done it herself. And I think that's what makes her so much more relatable and such an embodiment of the teachings. She's not just speaking from her head. She's speaking from embodied wisdom. And that's what makes her such an amazing teacher in her own right. Okay, so moving on. We're almost there. Let's talk about, so Mary, she's finished her vision, telling the disciples about her vision, and one of the disciples, I believe, Andrew. So then it says, Andrew began to speak and said to his brothers, so the other disciples, "Tell me, what do you think of these things she has been telling us? As for me, I do not believe that the teacher would speak like this. These ideas are too different from those we have known." And then Peter added, Peter the disciple, "How is it possible that the teacher, Jesus, talked in this manner with a woman about secrets of which we ourselves are ignorant? Must we change our customs and listen to this woman? Did he really choose her and prefer her to us?" So this right here, I mean, very symbolic of Christianity and the patriarchy and the demise of women as spiritual teachers and spiritual leaders in their own right. I mean, this just showcases like this woman who was, and they even admitted, was closer to Jesus than all of them, right? They said that she knew teachings that they didn't receive, and as soon as she reveals these teachings to them, they basically as a group laugh at her and dismiss her, and they say, I'm not sure I believe you. Why would Jesus speak like this to a woman? Because you have to remember, at this time, women were seen as second-class citizens. Women weren't seen as religious or spiritual leaders. And that's why it was so radical that Jesus was always surrounded by women, and he gave his closest teachings to Mary Magdalene, which says so much. And that's not something that's spoken about within the church. I wonder why. Because it's a men's club. We have to understand what agendas were being propagated at that time. So that's the Patriarchy 101 in the in Mary Magdalene's Gospel. And then it says, Mary wept and answered him, "My brother Peter, what can you be thinking? Do you believe that this is just my own imagination? That I invented this vision? Or do you believe that I would lie about our teacher?" So Mary, she's upset because she loves these disciples. They're her brothers. And I love how soft and gentle she is. Even though they're all attacking her, she... this is where you see her feminine energy coming out. She meets them with love and with grace, and she doesn't try to arc up to them or challenge them, but she asks them, "Do you believe that I would lie about our teacher?" And then bless Levi, he spoke up for Mary. And Levi says, Peter, you have always been hot-tempered, and now we see you repudiating a woman, just as our adversaries do. Yet if the teacher held her worthy, who are you to reject her? I'll read that again. Yet if the teacher, Jesus, held her worthy, who are you to reject her? Surely the teacher knew her very well, and he loved her more than us. Do you see that? Surely the teacher knew her very well, for he loved her more than us. Another alluding to the fact that Mary was more loved, that was intimate with Jesus. Again, it doesn't mean that they were in a relationship. I believe they were. But it could mean that she was just, more closer to Jesus and the other disciples. Again, not something that's spoken about within Christianity. And then Levi continues, therefore let us atone and become fully human, anthropos. Remember how I spoke about fully human, fully divine, remembering that, I'm having this human experience in this body, but ultimately I'm not this body, I'm not this matter, because I'll always return to my roots, to the one source. And when I am present in this time-space reality, when I live within the 3D, but I remember my connection, my oneness with all that is when I can see reality as it really is through the lens of God, true vision. So that's what it means to be fully human. So therefore let us atone, this is Levi, and become fully human so that the teacher can take root in us. Let us grow as he demanded of us and walk forth to spread the gospel, without trying to lay down any rules and laws other than those he witnessed. Then when Levi had said these words, they all went forth to spread the gospel. And that's the gospel according to Mary. So we did it. We went through it. We did it very quickly. We could have gone deeper, but I think that in a nutshell is like the main talking points about the Gospel of Mary, and we can dissect it even further. It'd be really cool to dive into the 7 deadly sins. I think maybe I'll do another episode on that. Let me know if that appeals to you, if you want to go deeper on this. Maybe I could create something like a study group where we study the Gospel of Mary and we could go through it like sentence by sentence. I'm so open for it, but you guys have to let me know if that's something you want, because I don't know if I'm just like alone here as a theology nerd, as a Mary Magdalene nerd. I'm happy to create things and communities, but I'm not going to create it if it's not really of interest to people. So that's all I wanted to share here today. If you enjoyed this episode, if you learned something new, feel free to share it with others who you think may appreciate this dissection of the Gospel of Mary. If you want to go deeper on it, then get yourself a copy. I think there's even free copies online that you can read. There's different versions. This one that I have is I'm probably going to pronounce his name wrong. It's French. Jean Lelu. I don't know if I pronounced that correctly, but that's the version I have. But there's many different versions, so there's a few with the different versions. They've been translated differently, so they may have a few words different to what I've read here today. But I think essentially it's the same gist. You're not going to find like extra pages or anything like that. It's just like a few different words here and there. So that's all I wanted to share with you today. I just want to mention before I go, I have a retreat coming up called the Divine Feminine Embodiment Retreat. Today we spoke a lot about Mary Magdalene and how she was embodied in what she was teaching. And that is very much the feminine way. We can use our masculine energy to understand these principles and the logic behind everything, but the way that Mary spoke, that Mary taught, was through embodiment. She had done her own work. She had lived the teachings of Jesus. And that's what made her so relatable and such, an amazing teacher in her own right, because she was living the truth. She wasn't just speaking from it from a conceptual level. And that's really the power of the divine feminine, to really embody these spiritual truths and to not have to teach in, the masculine way of sharing information, but being a way shower just in the way that you show up in the world. Like I said, just walking the walk by being present in every moment and remembering your oneness with everything and with the divine, right? And seeing the sacred in all. That's the feminine way, to be that embodiment and to walk forth in the world. That's how you spread the gospel, by just being embodiment of that truth, that you are one with everything. And so if you want to deepen on that and go further into that, then please join me at my October retreat. It's in Daylesford, Victoria. We're doing equine therapy with horses. We're going to be going further, talking about Mary Magdalene and other beautiful divine feminine embodiments. And we're going to hopefully be anchoring in more of these divine feminine truths and being, like I said, way showers of this knowledge, and doing it in a way where we just exude unconditional love to everyone that we meet, everyone that we interact with, every being. You know, that's my intention for this retreat. So if this appeals to you, if you want to connect with myself and other like-minded women that are walking this path and who, you know, want to step forward as, I want to say, like spiritual leaders in more of a feminine way, you know, this priestess path that's a lot of us are remembering and is being reclaimed on the planet right now, then please join me at the retreat this October. You can find more information in the show notes. So I'm going to leave it there, guys. Thank you so much for joining me today. I think you can tell I'm very passionate about this topic. It's a super big topic. I'm going to do more Mary Magdalene episodes in the future because I love her. I'm devoted to her. And I think she's such a revolutionary at this time, and more women are remembering her and her teachings. And there's this big Magdalene movement happening, which I'm so excited about. So thank you, and I will see you next week. Mwah.